Did you know that Geico's whole 15 minutes thing, that came from me? Really? My first idea was, in 1/4 of an hour, your savings will tower. Over you, figuratively speaking. But that's not catchy, is it? That's not going to swim about in your brain. So I thought, what about 15 minutes, 15%? Serendipity.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
We're pleased to welcome you to the AUSA Noon Report, our virtual series featuring senior Army leaders providing important updates on key defense topics. Our host today is the Executive Vice President of the Association of the United States Army, General Robert Brown.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Association of the United States Army Noon Report. We're very glad you've joined us today and appreciate your continued support for our programs and events. I would like to thank our sponsor, Geico, for their support of this edition of the Noon Report. Geico has been a national partner of AUSA since 2017. Geico has also been an affinity partner for many years. AUSA affinity partners support AUSA programs and provide many benefits to our members. Members may be eligible for special discounts, and just mention AUSA when you're renewing or getting a quote. I would like to give a brief introduction of our special guest today. Lieutenant General Daniel Karbler assumed duties as a Commanding General of the United States Army Space and Missile Defense Command and Joint Functional Component Command for Integrated Missile Defense on December 6, 2019. He most recently served as the Chief of Staff of United States Strategic Command at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. He was a principal advisor to the U.S. STRATCOM Commander and Deputy Commander and directed the activities of the command staff by developing and implementing policies and procedures in support of the command's missions. He chaired numerous boards, oversaw the command's corporate process, and served as the director of the commander's staff. Also joining us today, Colonel Andrew Morgan, who was selected by NASA in 2013 as an astronaut. Colonel Morgan is an emergency physician in the United States Army with subspecialty certification in primary care sports medicine. He's a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point and the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences in Bethesda, Maryland. Prior to his selection to NASA's 21st group of astronauts, Colonel Morgan served in elite special operations units worldwide. And he most recently served as flight engineer on the International Space Station for Expedition 60, 61, and 62 from July 2019 through April of 2020. For more details of their robust accomplishments, decorations, and assignments, you can assess the full bio of Lieutenant General Karbler and Colonel Morgan in the handout tab on the upper right corner of your screen. And if you have questions for Lieutenant General Karbler and Colonel Morgan today, please use the question and answer tab and post your question in the box at the lower right side of your screen. We'll try our best to answer as many of your questions as time will allow. We will get the conversation started with a fireside chat and then address questions from the audience. So please start thinking about what you want to ask as we welcome Lieutenant General Dan Karbler and Colonel Andrew Morgan. Wow, what an honor to have you both here. And Dan, no offense, I mean, you've had many great accomplishments, but to have an astronaut who is also, you know, a physician and such a talented individual, just incredible. Drew, your parents must be upset you were an underachiever. Huh?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the kind introduction and for having me here today.
It's great to have you here. Let's start, Dan, on what a unique command Space and Missile Defense Command is. So tell us a little bit about your command and the challenges.
Sure, sir. Absolutely. First, thanks to AUSA for hosting us and allowing us to talk about Space and Missile Defense Command and the Joint Force Component Command for Integrated Missile Defense. And it really is a privilege to have Drew Morgan here, who came back to Earth just a little bit over a year ago. It's amazing how fast a year goes by. So I just want to talk people first. Chief talks about people first, and before I even get into anything about SMDC or JFIC IMD, I want to talk about people first within the command. And for this past year plus of the pandemic, we should all be very proud of what SMDC and what JFIC IMD have been able to accomplish. We have a no-fail 24/7 mission, whether that's for providing missile warning, whether that's for providing satellite communications. The civilians, the soldiers, the contractors, almost 3,000 of us that make up SMDC and JFIC IMD have been on it. And that ranges everything from my 1st Space Brigade, which is a multi-compo brigade of active, reserve, and National Guard, my Satellite Operations Brigade, and then the 100th GMD, which provides our missile defense protection of our homeland, as we like to say, 300, defending 300 million. And throughout this past year, we haven't missed a beat. So whether that's through the certification, the training, the readiness that the chief is making sure that we stay on point for all the time, we just have not missed a beat. And we've been able to do that through very adaptive leaders, our soldiers and civilians who have been able to understand the dynamics of the COVID environment and do all the necessary workarounds, be innovative about how they approached doing their jobs, because they had to. We do not have the ability to allow a detachment get wiped out from COVID and have everybody have to go into quarantine. We're not able to do that. And we're at 23 locations in 11 different time zones around the world. And because that, we're very small, discrete elements across the globe. So those small, discrete elements, whether they're doing JTAGs for the theater missile warning or doing satellite communications, they had to stay ready all the time. So we really made sure that the leadership understood that. And again, the soldiers and civilians that did that mission took it on wholeheartedly. And we never missed a beat. Also within the command, so I talked a little bit about the operational elements that I have there with 1st Space Brigade, Sat Ops Brigade, and the 100th GMD. But I've also got the Center of Excellence for Space and Missile Defense Command. They do the requirements. They run our space schoolhouse. So all the training that has to take place before our space professionals go into their positions has to be done at the schoolhouse. And again, we adapted very well to the COVID environment. We were still able to get all of our soldiers and civilians through the training pipeline so that we didn't miss a beat on readiness. And then the third part of SMDC is the technical center. So we do a lot of the research and development for the Army with respect to space. We also support the RICTO in terms of hypersonics and directed energy. And again, throughout our COVID environment, we didn't miss a beat. They kept the RICTO process going. They allowed RICTO to keep moving out fast as they are. And as we know, we'll get a hypersonic battery delivered here in 2023. And so I just kind of want to capture the people first and how well we did within SMDC and JFIC IMD. And then lastly, the JFIC IMD component of the second command hat that I wear, not very well known, but that's about 130 civilians and soldiers, a joint command that really does all of the missile defense operations support globally. So as we look at the very limited missile defense assets that we have across all the combatant commands, my team at JFIC IMD stationed up in Colorado Springs, they provide all of that expertise and experience, analysis and recommendations that come up to myself that ultimately goes up to the Joint Staff and OSD for missile defense recommendations. So again, just want to make sure we capture people first. We talk about people first, and then sometimes we tuck it, somewhere underneath. But I wanted to make sure so that we understood that how proud I am and how proud everybody who's listening in on this telecast should be of their soldiers and civilians at SMDC. I think that when we listened to the Secretary of Defense talk just the other day, and he talked about new types of warfighting, and I look at how SMDC is postured to address exactly what the SecDef's talking about. I like to talk about, I call it, we occupy key terrain at the strategic integration nexus. And as the Army service component to U.S. Strategic Command, to U.S. Space Command, as well as supporting NORTHCOM with the Global Missile Defense Mission, with the Homeland Missile Defense Mission, we really have an integration piece across those three COCOMs, as well as the missile defense work and space work that we do across the geographic combatant commands. So that integration nexus really puts us right smack dab in the middle of what the SecDef is talking about in terms of integration. And I think as we go forward and we look at the future strategic deterrence review, and as we look at how strategic deterrence, the new SecDef approaches strategic deterrence, we're going to play a key role in that. And so we're well postured throughout the command to be able to do that. The last thing that I would leave you with is with having Drew Morgan here. Little known is that SMDC is responsible for the Army Astronaut program, and we have that detachment down there. And Drew is the commander of the Army Astronaut Detachment. So we kind of got the moons of Venus to align, if you will. My space guys hate it when I say that, but we got them all to align that Drew is up here this week to be able to join us, and how apropos that we would do it on the day where May the 4th be with you. So,
Star Wars Day, very good.
That's right, sir. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Colonel Drew Morgan.
Great.
Well, sir, thanks again for bringing me along today. It's a real pleasure to be here and represent the diversity of missions that we have in SMDC that General Karbler has highlighted. The Army NASA Detachment is just a very small capability within the operational arm of SMDC, but we're highly visible. We have 3 active duty Army astronauts right now, as well as 3 active duty FA-40 space operations officers that are down in the detachment as part of broadening assignments, as well as a Department of the Army civilians. So we're very small, but mighty in effect, highly visible. And if I had to distill our mission down at the Army NASA Detachment, it is to represent soldiers in space on the ultimate high ground. And it's my honor to be representing that way. And the Army has had a very enduring legacy on our human space flight program. And then just in some recent examples, a couple weeks ago in April, the SpaceX Dragon launched, and the commander of that vehicle was Shane Kimbrough, a retired Army officer, a former detachment commander. He joined up there Mark Vandehei, who is a FA-40 space operations officer, retired from active duty, and now serving his second flight on board the International Space Station. He's going to be up there for an extended duration. So the presence of the Army in space, in low Earth orbit, on the International Space Station in recent years, lots of recent examples of that. We are at the point now where 2 of the 3 active duty Army astronauts have flown. Lieutenant Colonel Ann McLean flew immediately before me. There was a period of time of almost 16 months where we had a continuous Army presence on board the ISS. So very exciting time. The Army officers that we have are obviously, we are very good at going out and finding and recruiting the best and selecting them to the astronaut program. Everybody that comes and is selected as a NASA astronaut is highly technically capable. But to highlight again what General Karbler mentioned about people first and leadership qualities that Army astronauts bring in addition to those technical skills, the reputation goes far and wide in the astronaut program, and we find Army officers and retired Army officers rising to significant positions of leadership at NASA.
That's terrific, Drew. Thanks. Ultimate high ground. I love that, being an infantry guy, in particular. But thanks for the contributions, and small, but boy, talk about powerful. So a reminder, folks, I see questions are coming in. I know there's going to be a bunch for both of you. Let me start with the first for General Karbler. You mentioned, Dan, that space crosses all domains, and it affects all domains. So how do you see Army space transforming during the next 15 years to support what they call, the aim point force 2035, the future all domain, multi-domain? How do you see it changing to support that?
Yes, sir. Thanks. Well, you'll appreciate this, especially with your background coming from USAPAC. So as we have our formations established within the multi-domain task force, we have the I2Qs, information intelligence, cyber electronic warfare in space.
Mhm.
And so our space capabilities will play a big role in that. We're also looking at how we ensure that we have theater space capabilities. So the Theater Strike Effects Group, the TSEG, will have a full-up headquarters out at Indo-PACOM. We'll also have capabilities within EUCOM and CENTCOM as well. And so that will allow that ground force commander, the GIFLIC in most cases, but also the Army component commander, to be able to leverage all the space capabilities that we bring, whether that be space control, space planning, to bring those space effects to support not just what we do in terms of our shoot, move, and communicate, but to address anything that the adversary could bring to us. And so really excited about bringing that structure on board, bringing those capabilities to the Army, and it's right in line with what Jim Rainey and the CAC team are looking at for his aim point.
You know, it's interesting. Every combatant commander wants a multi-domain task force now because they realize the challenge. And what you described, Dan, is their persistent presence during competition with the space capability we've never had. And you mentioned the I2Qs battalion that's forward and can impact preventing things from going to crisis, or if it does, can help reduce the conflict, and certainly is a huge deterrent factor. So the land certainly matters, but the space aspect of it is so key. And that's just a great point. And as we dive more into, I found that, a lot of folks don't realize space affects everything. Folks can't maneuver, they can't do anything without space and the assets, and then additional ones that we have, the new capabilities out there, having a huge impact. So thanks for that. Also it's recently the Vice Chief of Space Operations, Lieutenant General Thompson, said that the Space Force has come to an agreement with the Army on which units will move over to the new space service, because I know that's a topic a lot of people are thinking about, that key space capability. Will we be able to keep enough? And so I guess, can you talk to us about what conditions need to be in place prior to the transfer, and how does that look, and any concerns in that?
Yes, sir. Yeah, so a couple of pieces, and I'll talk people first. So what we want to do, make sure, is when capabilities from the Army transfer over to the Space Force, we do need to make sure that those people who would transfer over voluntarily are taken care of.
Yeah.
So it might seem kind of arcane or mundane, but how does somebody get promoted? Well, how do they re-enlist? How are their assignments going to work?
Always difficult when there's change like that. So
always
it's
difficult
a great
when
point.
your own service changing,
Yeah.
but now going to another service. So
right.
We're working very closely with the Space Force and different planning teams that we have across the Army staff and within SMDC with the Space Force and Space Command. I'll talk about that here in a second. But we're working very close to make sure that those conditions are understood by everybody and agreed to. And so far, working very smoothly with the Space Force. The other piece that goes right hand in hand with the people first, though, is we've got to make sure that we take care of the mission. So General Dickinson, as the SpaceCom commander, he's got no-fail missions that we provide to him 24/7. And so as we transfer over to the Space Force, kind of, do no harm to the mission accomplishment has got to be really the foot stopper there. But I do like to talk about, or I like to say that the people will take care of the mission because we will take care of the people. And if we go in with that mindset, the transfer over to the Space Force will be fine.
No, well, that is key, and you're absolutely right. In change like that, sometimes the people kind of get lost in the first in anything. It can be tough. So that's great you're putting that emphasis on it. Thanks for doing that. Also, going over to Drew, a question came in. I think it's a really good one out there, saying that they've heard you say you were a soldier first, which is pretty cool to hear. How did your Army training influence your NASA experience? It's a great question.
Yeah, I think if you ask anybody in the detachment, both our FA-40 officers and our astronauts, they would say that they're soldiers first. And I've had a atypical career that's brought me to this point, but soldier was number one. I chose to be a soldier first, and that's what I always wanted to be. And I still bleed green, and everybody down there at NASA.
Even though your dad was Air Force, right?
That is true. That's true.
You chose right early.
Absolutely.
Army early on.
But he has great respect for his parents' service, as I remind him.
Of course.
And we also remind the Space Force as well, our grandchild. So, Yes, absolutely. And I say I'm a soldier, physician, astronaut, but I am a soldier first and soldier always. And so I believe that to my core. And when NASA selected me in 2013, they were selecting an Army officer that was a product of Army education, Army experiences, Army skills, and so they knew what they were buying.
Yeah.
And I think that all those Army astronauts that I've highlighted
Yeah.
over the years have that NASA's been pleased with the product that the Army has donated to them.
Well, it's great to know, because if it can work as an astronaut, I'm sorry, it could work with anything. You know, I mean, that talk about complex and challenging, and so that Army training paid off. That's great. Thanks, Drew. Brad has a question out there for you, Dan. He says there's a lot of discussion about the Army's long-range ISR requirements and space capabilities. Do you foresee building your own layer of satellites, or are you doing experiments to inform and shape your requirements that will be met by other services? So that's a great question.
Yeah, so our tech center works very closely with the AP&T CFT cross-functional
Yeah.
team with Willie Nelson. And if you read Willie's article from the other day, he talked about, you know, we're not in the business of launching our own
Right.
capabilities.
Right.
We have satellite capabilities that we have, but also we got to leverage the commercial sector, and as well as leverage the other agencies'
Mhm.
capabilities out there to get the robust sensor network, as well as a communications network. So we can provide the capabilities down to the ground commander. So whether that's going to be for, you know, long haul satellite communications, the deep sensing, as we talked about, to support our long range precision fires capabilities.
Mhm.
Again, having that capability resident for the ground commander. And it kind of goes back to our earlier discussion about the Space Force and
Right.
capabilities. We need to make sure that those unique Army capabilities, those unique Army requirements that
Mhm.
space provides, we got to make sure that we retain those in the Army,
Mhm.
because the ground commander is going to want capability
Right.
now.
But it sounds like it's kind of sensor agnostic, platform agnostic. As you're looking at all domains, you're trying, what sensors out there that can help you in that speed required, kind of a level of jointness we've never had before, but we're
Yes, sir.
striving for. Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for highlighting that, because I talked about we're at the strategic integration nexus.
Right.
So this is where my relationship with Space Command as the Army Service Component Command comes in, as well as my missile defense side with Stratcom, because we own missile defense radars that are out
Yeah.
there, the Tippy 2s. You
Yeah,
might be familiar with
exactly.
them. We have those. They do missile defense mission, but they can also do space domain awareness. And so General Dickinson is very interested in having those capabilities that not only can do a missile
Mhm.
defense capability, but also tying in to be able to provide support to his space mission.
Makes great sense. Yeah, and a level we've never had before, but certainly if anybody can do it, we can get there, and no doubt. Now, a good question from Nicholas out there that I've heard before. How does the Army plan on ensuring commanders are aware and educated on how the space environment affects their operations as it grows more and more influential in multi-domain operations? And Nicholas, thanks for that question.
Yeah, Nicholas, thank you. And we're on a campaign of learning from SMDC out to TRADOC, out to the Combined Arms Center. I've been fortunate. I've been able to participate in the Army Lessons Learned Forum to provide space vignettes, or vignettes where space capabilities and space enablers for a ground force commander, like, for example, for a hasty river crossing.
Mhm.
And what does space capabilities bring to the Army river crossing?
Right.
And we provided that out. We are really emphasizing within our education opportunities, whether that's at the War College or
Mhm.
whether that's at ILE, is really reinvigorating our space training, and to ensure that folks understand what space does for the maneuver commander. It's not just on orbit things,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
there's tactical application of space capabilities that we have. And then, so in addition to the education side is the training side. So at the combat training centers, again, we're making sure that our space capabilities are understood, as well as replicating adversary space capabilities. So as soldiers go out there and they're getting GPS jammed or whatever, they understand what they have to do to overcome that GPS jamming. And I'll give an example. At the signal school just last month or a couple months ago, those BOLIC lieutenants, they went out and we jammed them. And so they got a firsthand experience about, hey, here's what it's like when you don't have capabilities provided to you.
That's great, because I do think I've seen a lot of folks say, "Oh, it's just my satellite, my communications, or this or that." Oh, but there's so many things that it impacts, and so that education is important, and that's a great way to do it. You jam them; they'll remember that lesson
Yes, sir.
when they couldn't talk, and that'll be a hard-earned.
If I could, I'd jam everybody's cell phone who's
Yeah.
in a bullet class
Oh,
just
yeah,
for
yeah.
10 minutes.
That's great. Thanks. Now, Drew, a question for you that's a really good one. I know a lot of people would be asking out there is, how are Army astronauts selected? And then what is the process for volunteering? And asked by John out there. And I think a lot of folks would be wondering that and curious, because such a small number.
Sure.
Any light you can shed on that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Question. One of the most popular questions that we answer.
Yeah.
And so, NASA selects astronauts. The Army doesn't provide anything more than just a cursory level screening, which usually those officers in the Army NASA detachment have a hand in doing that service level screening. And so NASA selects astronaut classes about every 4 years or so. And then we are right now at the beginning of the process of selecting the next class, because it has already been almost 4 years since we selected the last class. And you apply. It starts out as a MILPER message, and with instructions on how to provide your application to NASA. Those are screened.
I was hoping to be something a little more high speed than a MILPER message, you know.
Well, it all starts with a MILPER
all
message.
starts there, yeah.
and then an application on USA Jobs.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's it starts that simple. Becomes more complex after that. After you start to make cuts, there are interviews. There's a series of interviews and aptitude testing, and ultimately culminates in a phone call that asks you to come down to NASA. And our classes tend to be small. My class only had 8 astronauts selected in it. The class that we selected after mine had about a dozen American astronauts in it. So they tend to be small.
Any idea, like those selected for the initial screening, any idea what percentage makes it, or a percent? It's probably a tough question, or maybe unfair.
Well, to put it in perspective, the class of 2017, the last one we selected, the first one we selected after mine, had almost 18,000 applicants.
Wow.
And we selected a dozen,
Yeah.
one of which was an Army officer, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Rubio.
Yeah.
So the Army and military officers in general, but the Army have a very good track record.
Yeah.
And the operational skills and all those things that I've highlighted that they bring really make them stand out among those thousands.
It's good news in the amount of talent out there, but it's that's really a sense of accomplishment when you make it. That's for
NASA
sure.
recognizes the skill set that Army officers bring.
That's great. Well, thanks for answering that.
I would like to, if I could. So, because I saw a comment came up about explaining the FA-40 population, so space operations officers. And so not every FA-40 is an astronaut. We have FA-40s that provide expertise to at the ASCC level, Corps, division levels, JTFs, et cetera.
Critical role.
Critical. And so they're either operating in the space support elements or Army space support teams. And again, they provide that ground commander with the expertise and how he or she can take full advantage of space capabilities, space enablers, as well as, again, adversary space capabilities. So very, very small number within the Army astronaut detachment, but a very broad FA-40 community globally deployed.
And that's continued to grow quite a bit over the last few years. And I've seen a lot of officers very interested in that, lots of opportunities, because as you mentioned earlier, there'll even be an FA-40 with a multi-domain task force out, and there'll be a number of those in different combatant commands and all over within the commands, the structure. So continuing to grow.
Right. We even have an FA-40 commanding as the first commander of the I2Qs
right
now,
which is key.
So lots of opportunities. And when folks are done with their initial branch and they want to do a functional area transfer over the FA-40, we find that we have far more applicants than we do have slots, which is good.
Yeah.
And again, I see the mission growing, and so one of the highlights of SpaceCom and Space Force is really re-energizing space.
That's excellent.
DoD.
And Joseph sent that question in. Thanks for answering. I'm sure he's glad you answered that. Look at another question came in. Over the decades, defense analysts have been critical of the U.S. military as having too many redundant air forces, U.S. Air Force, United States Navy aviation, Army aviation, et cetera. Are we facing the same thing with space? Too many redundant space forces? A good question
There's plenty of room in space.
there.
But what I will tell you is each service is going to have a unique perspective and going to have a unique list of requirements. Some are going to be on-orbit requirements, which frankly, as the Army, we're not as concerned with the on-orbit requirements. That's really the strategic level, and that's really what the Space Force is going to take a look at. That's what will drive their requirements. But the Army is going to have unique space enabling requirements that are going to directly support the ground commander, and they will be prioritized in accordance with the Army requirements and Army priorities. And so I think that we have to make sure we understand the unique aspects of each mission set throughout the space domain. And then we will communicate, we will work with the Space Force and with the other services to make sure that we don't have, duplicative. Redundancy isn't necessarily bad either, because if one goes out, you want to be able to have, a redundant means.
Right.
But things that are duplicative that don't make us good stewards of taxpayer money.
It's a great way to look at it. And you look at all the domains: air, land, sea, cyber, and space. And in this multi-domain and all-domain operations, the joint warfighting concept, clearly space and cyber have the greatest potential in the newest of, I've been around a while, but what we're learning almost daily. So that's a great way to look at it. You're going to need some redundancy for sure, and you got to be careful to make it too lean. It won't do what we need it to do. So that's great. Let's see a question for Drew from Trot. It's a really I'm glad he asked it. A great question. If there hasn't already, do you think we'll see an enlisted soldier in space?
I'm really glad that somebody asked that question, because I was just thinking about my response to the previous question, which is the bare bones requirements are education based. They're not rank based. So any soldier, any MOS, any background is eligible. And I'm glad also that General Karbler made the distinction that you don't need to be an FA-40 to become an astronaut. Like I said, you can come from any background. So absolutely, the conditions are set for an enlisted soldier with the right background is eligible. NASA drives those requirements. And the Army, we just provide a little bit of bare bones screening at the beginning of the process, and then NASA will select them without respect to the rank or background.
And I suspect with the talented force we have out there, enlisted force, and the best non-commissioned officers in the world, NASA could use a great non-commissioned officer.
Absolutely.
And that's who makes things work for the Army, no doubt about it. Right?
Absolutely. I could give you many examples of where we could use an NCO at NASA. And so that is a priority for me going into subsequent application periods, so that we can push that and make sure soldiers know that all soldiers are eligible, and we need.
That's a great point, because I think getting the word out would be important, because it probably very talented individuals, but they think, oh, I'm not eligible if I'm not an officer, but they are. And,
absolutely.
So that's a great point, getting the word out.
And we're a technological branch. I mean, we are technologically savvy. When you look at what the soldiers of 1st Space Brigade do, and the soldiers of Satellite Operations Brigade do, and the soldiers in the missile defense arena, what they do, it really makes me proud of where the Army's at with respect to technology, and what we teach our soldiers, and then what they execute on a day-to-day basis. It is just amazing.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be surprised at all, hopefully based on this conversation, that we have soldiers that take that next step.
Yeah, that'd be great. And it is impressive. As an old guy, we used to slow things down, and the reality is, no, you got to speed it up. For this generation is so talented, and they are unbelievable. So yeah, I suspect that's great. Get the word out, and we'll have an enlisted astronaut pretty soon. A question from Kevin came in. What has changed for SMDC provided forces since the stand-up of U.S. Spacecom and the U.S. Space Forces?
Yeah, so nothing's really changed with respect to the forces that we have. It's just the command relationship now with U.S. Space Command, and within their organizations, within Space Command, JTF-SD, as well as the CSPOC out there. So my brigade commanders, they fall up underneath those general officers at Space Command for operational control of those forces globally deployed. So it is actually pretty seamless. It happened when General Dickinson was the SMDC commander initially, and then we've fallen in on their battle rhythms. You know, we fall in on all the exercises. So really, it goes to the credit of the soldiers and the commanders and how well their training is, that just because Spacecom stood up, okay, we're still doing our JOB, and now we just fall up underneath a different combatant commander vice.
So not as much change as people thought or suspected. That's great.
Right. It was, and again, it was, you know, the change was just the integration with the new staff and the new subordinate commands underneath Space Command.
Question from Alexander that our adversaries recognize our Western reliance on space enablers to achieve information dominance currently and moving forward. What keeps you up at night with our combined ability to fight through a disrupted, degraded, and denied space environment?
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. So our ability to go fast and where our adversaries are at right now and where we're at right now, we have got to be able to keep pace with our adversaries. And that's why it's really heartening to me to see the support that we're getting with things like the TSIG and capabilities into I2Qs. It's just the appetite is there for space, for Army space capabilities. Again, recognizing that the adversaries are out there, they're contesting us at every aspect into space. So we just got to be able to go fast. Another piece too is we've got to make sure that space isn't treated as this highly classified, you know, only a few people have access into the information. When we normalize space as a warfighting domain, we've got to make sure that those planners, whether they're at battalion, brigade, division, corps, whatever level, they can get in there and understand the Army space capabilities, those Army enablers, to bring them into the full combined arms effort, instead of it, oh, the space guys are off in, you know, off in the dark room over there because it's all highly classified.
Yeah.
We've got to have those planners involved in the whole maneuver commander scheme.
I definitely in previous combat experience saw that challenge where, you know, the space assets, often you couldn't tell anybody what you discovered and couldn't use them. They were off in their own little, so the merging them in and making them a part of the team is so key to leverage that. I saw a question from, I'm going to guess it's Lieutenant General retired J.T. Thompson, a superstar who recently retired from a NATO position. JT, thanks for the question. He's asking, he thanks you both for your leadership, and then he wants to know what SMDC's relationship with Army Futures Command and how that, you know, how that's evolved and how that affects your future capabilities.
Yeah, so thanks, JT. Glad you're on the net. So we work, our Tech Center and our Center of Excellence both work very closely with Army Futures Command, especially with Willie Nelson and the AP&T cross-functional team. So many of his requirements, we actually are the support to the AP&T CFT. So as Willie has concepts, we're helping him develop those concepts. And obviously he reports up to the Army Futures Command through their chain of command. So it's a great relationship that we have there. Willie is an alumni out of Space and Missile Defense Command. So it just is it's really a natural fit for us.
Great. Yeah, that's good to hear, because so much potential there, but it could be conflict if it's not worked right. Jack has a question, Drew, for you, that did your experience in special operations help you as an astronaut, and if so, how? And I thought we'd get that question because of your extensive special ops background.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to highlight that I was an enabler in special operations, but I was able to train alongside a lot of very brave soldiers, and went to some far off places like many soldiers out there and got some highly specialized training. And I found myself drawing on all of them at one point or another. As a specific example, when I made the first of my spacewalks, and I went out of the hatch and I saw the ground below me, 250 miles below. You know, for a lot of astronauts, that's a moment that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And yeah, it had my heart racing, but it reminded me a lot of making a military free fall parachute jump. And I just fell back on that. I've done this a couple hundred times.
That's a great example. Yeah.
Just
and
another
that
day.
Training you were talking about earlier,
Fall right
paying
back
off.
on it.
So it wasn't, that's got to be
Yes, sir. And that's just one of many examples.
Yeah. Thanks, Drew. That's great. Heather asks, Dan, this one for you. And what is your greatest challenge or opportunity facing your strategic infrastructure over the next 15 years? Tough one.
Yeah. making sure that as we talk about convergence and we talk about joint all-domain command and control, we got to have the pipes and the networks to be able to support that. Terrestrial, space-based, it's got to be secure, and it's got to be able to deliver the right information at the right time to the right point, whether that's a commander to make a decision, whether that's sensor data to a weapon system to be able to engage within time. That's my biggest concern is making sure that that networked architecture as a infrastructure and understood and secured infrastructure is built out properly.
Yeah, great. Drew, the most popular question you get, and you touched on a little bit earlier about how do I become an astronaut, but I know there are a lot of young folks that tuned in out there watching, and they would ask you, what's your best advice? And you touched on a little bit, but I would like you, if you wouldn't mind, just because I'm sure that'll be really helpful to folks out there. What would be your best advice?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thinking about this challenge.
Yeah, if I could call it a formula, there doesn't, that sounds overly simplistic, but I think there are some things that I think to just keep in mind. The importance of following your passion, doing something that you love doing, and doing that very well, doing that with excellence. So that's the second part, is just doing that thing that you love and finding out what can I do to become the very best at that. And then the last part of that is being a good team player. That means being a good team leader, but knowing what it also means to be a good follower and being somebody who is also a good peer, and just all around 360 degrees, just somebody that people want to follow, want to lead, want to be a peer with. And that's a really important aspect. And we emphasize that in the Army. The late Major General Michael Collins, Apollo 11 astronaut, I heard him once say, and I combine that with my simple advice, which is that I can't guarantee that will help you become an astronaut, but it will lead to a fulfilling career. And so I credit him with that. And
yeah, very well said. Yeah, thanks. That's just tremendous advice. Appreciate you, because I know that's a question folks had out there. So thanks so much. Let's see, Harry asks, how does your command play in the development and employment of hypersonic weapons? A key thing we know is a joint effort out there and all the services. How does your command play in that?
Yeah, sure. So when the RICTO was stood up with Neil Thorogood, much of our command was matrixed over to actually help the RICTO as they go into the development and creating the prototypes. So we stay linked in with General Thorogood's team very closely. And it's important because in the missile defense role, a lot of people just want to think of missile defense as the active defense, right? Give me a THAAD or give me a Patriot or give me an Aegis BMD in active defense. But attack ops also plays an important role. And hypersonics is the ultimate attack ops weapon to use in terms of being part of the integrated air and missile defense mission.
Great. David asks a question on, as a Space Force and Army space elements expand or develop, what are the opportunities or demands for talent and skills that are not FA-40 space operations officers, astronauts, or space-specific MOSs? In other words, what are key talent needs in the space arena? And yet, the planners, logisticians, personnel, getting back to that people aspect, what do you need to help you?
Yeah, David, you must have been sitting in on the discussion we had with General Dickinson yesterday, because we talked specifically about that. It's not just space professionals within Space Command, strategists, intel officers, ops officers, logisticians, planners. There's always going to be space expertise and space professionals, but there's a broad array of opportunities within Space Command, or frankly within SMDC or JFIC IMD, to take advantage of your skills and attributes. So apply, tell your assignment officer that you want to go over to Space Command, and you'll find that it's a great opportunity, and it will allow you to broaden your skill set as well.
Great, thanks, Dan. Drew, it'll be our last question. Unfortunately, it's going fast here, and wish we had more time. But a question out there: they understand that many astronauts choose to stay with NASA when they retire. from the military. And folks are wanting to know, what does your future hold for you? If you've made that decision yet, maybe too early. We want you to stay for a little bit longer.
Yes, sir.
It's a bad question. There's an assignment officer sitting right here.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Well, we've selected 18 astronauts over the years.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of those have stayed at NASA. And because, you get selected to be an astronaut, you want to fly multiple times. You can transition out of the service, continue as a civil servant,
Right.
as an astronaut, and continue doing the same job as effectively. But this has been a conversation that General Karbler, General Dickinson, and I have had a number of times about the importance of being able to bring Army astronauts back, reintegrate them into the force, maybe even offer the opportunity for back and forth. We already do that with our rotational FA-40 officers that come as broadening assignments.
Right.
So there is already some exchange between NASA and the force. They come for 2 or 3 years, and then they go back and they bring some of that experience with them back to NASA. But we'd like to be able to do the same thing with our astronauts as well, and create those opportunities. So that's an active, ongoing conversation.
Yeah, great, and lots of opportunities. So you pretty much committed to staying with us indefinitely, is what I heard, Dan.
Sir, I'm not leaving the Army anytime soon.
Great, fantastic. Now, how about a quick explanation? What's going on tomorrow at the Army Museum? Dan, you can explain it, or if Drew wants to, it's quite an honor.
Go ahead, Drew.
Yes, sir. Well, we're going to be going to the National Museum in the U.S. Army. It'll be my first visit there. And General Karbler is going to pin my astronaut wings, which is a device that goes on my existing wings, which are the master flight surgeon wings right now.
Great.
Although we do hope to eventually be able to put that device on the Army Space Badge as well, or the Space Operations Badge. And so we're going to do that in a small ceremony with just a small handful of people from the museum, General Karbler and I. And
then you're going to donate some
Yes,
items
sir. And then
to the
also
museum?
I flew a number of items with me to the space station. One of those is an artifact from the Army Museum. It's a World War II medic's brassard that was worn during World War II. It flew with me. It represents multiple things. One, my love, like any good Army officer, I love history and I love World War II history. I have a medical background. I had members of my own family that served in World War II at Normandy. So I'm going to deliver that back for them to add to the collection. But I also have a number of personal flight equipment that I'm going to donate to the museum as well for display there.
Well, congratulations on earning the badge, of course, but thank you for keeping an incredible tradition. Look at that history, honoring the greatest generation. All our Army has done by the World War II medics patch there that you took to space with you. It's just fantastic. And one of the things that, it's just so amazing about our Army. And I'm telling you, you're going to love the museum. It's fantastic. You can't wait till we get a little more back to normal ops and folks can visit regularly. And I know they want to spend a lot of time. It's an amazing museum. So congrats on that.
Well, thank you, sir. I can't think of a better backdrop to have this.
Yeah.
It's a really
You'll be
special
impressed
opportunity.
by it, I'm certain.
I'm
certain. Well,
I can't wait.
I'll tell you, can't thank you two enough. We could go on for another several hours. Thanks so much for joining us today. Before we close, I do want to inform our audience of some upcoming events. On May 6th, we have a Thought Leaders with Lieutenant General Christopher Tickell, the Deputy Chief of the British Army General Staff. Join us on June 3rd. We have a Thought Leaders Talent Management panel discussion. It kind of relates to some of the things we were talking today. That'll be fascinating on what's going on in talent management. On June 9th, we have a Thought Leaders with Lieutenant General Retired Ben Hodges, former U.S. Army Europe commander. He's also author of Future War and Defense of Europe. That'll be a great session. And don't forget to save the date for 2021 AUSA annual meeting and exposition. Yes, we're getting back in person, October 11th to 13th. It'll be exciting here in Washington, D.C. Stay tuned for registration details. They'll be coming soon. For registration at any of these events or more information on all AUSA events, visit our website at ausa.org/meet. Thanks again to our sponsor for today's event, Geico. Without contributions from sponsors like Geico, these events wouldn't be possible. Finally, thank all of you who are AUSA members. Membership matters. Thanks to your membership, we can support soldiers more and help us put on programs like today's Noon Report. And if you take a look at our robust member benefits, membership pays for itself if you use your benefits. So join AUSA or renew your membership at ausa.org. Thank you again for your attendance and joining us today on, and it's just a great session. And thanks again to General Karbler and Drew Morgan for joining us this session. Thank you.